The episode archive of Your Creative Push is now easier than ever to navigate. Head to yourcreativepush.com and click episodes at the top. There you'll see all the episodes listed by date and by genre. Every episode of YCP is meant to inspire you, regardless of your creative passion, but you can now easily find the ones that fit your creative medium when you need a little extra push. Your Creative Push, episode 247.
If you don't do the first step, it just stays in your head. Stop that resistance before it catches hold almost.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngmin Brown, and my guest today is Tara Roskell. Tara is the Idea Medic. She is the creator of the Idea Medic blog and the new Idea Medic podcast. Tara is passionate in the belief that everybody has the ability to be creative, and they just need to believe it and to also learn more about the idea generation process, which is what she tries to do with the Idea Medic, and that's what she comes on the show today to talk about. She talks about how her fascination for idea generation came to be. And then we get into a whole slew of ways that you can come up with ideas when you are stuck or when you feel like you are kind of doing the same thing over and over and over again and you really want to shake things up. She thinks about this stuff all the time. She is an expert in idea generation. But on top of all of those strategies, we also talk about the importance of having a specific goal of producing a certain amount of ideas every single day, even if they aren't good ones. Just the strategy of coming up with new things every single day so that you can pluck out those gems. Tara also talks about a recent experiment with Sandra Busby, who is also on this podcast, who is also a part of the Facebook group, in which they tested the effects of alcohol on creativity. And the results might surprise you. We also talked about how building a habit out of your creativity, especially after 100 days of this habit, can take the decision-making process out of it. But even further than that, getting to the first step of a creative idea within 5 seconds so that you don't give that resistance enough time to stop you, making it a habit to get to your ideas right away. Just some really powerful messages in this podcast, especially if you are someone who struggles with A, idea generation, or B, getting to those ideas once you get them. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Tara Roskell. Hi, Tara. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you very much for being here. It's a pleasure. I was on your show and now you're on mine, so we've come full circle. Having conversations with somebody or seeing somebody in the Facebook group and being able to have some interactions and read blog posts is one thing, but then to actually kind of have a discussion, it's really a pleasure.
Yeah, it's so nice as well because you don't necessarily meet people in real life that have got sort of similar interests, but you can this way.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the best things I found about the podcast, or just like blogging and just any kind of interaction online. It's always like more friendly and people are more open online than they are in real life. And you can find the people that are really like into the same things that you are. So it's definitely been a pleasure.
I totally agree.
Well, on this show, we like to start out by giving a brief bio, kind of how you got to the point you are today. So if you wouldn't mind telling the listeners your past and how you got to the point you are today.
Okay. I don't know how far you want me to start back, but
however far you want, wherever you feel is a good starting point.
Okay. When I was 5, but seriously, when I was a kid, I absolutely loved drawing and I would literally be constantly drawing. It was always things you could see. So it'd be photographs or things I could see in front of me. So I always knew I wanted to go sort of something sort of arty, in the arty line. And I went fairly traditional route and I went and studied a general art and design course at college. And the idea of that was just to kind of experiment, try out all different areas of kind of art and design and decide what area you wanted to pursue to a higher level. So I did that, and I look back at this now and I think this is kind of bizarre, but I kind of really liked fine art and also liked illustration. And I really couldn't decide sort of what I wanted to do. And I remember one of my tutors just saying, well, if people can't decide, quite often they go into graphic design. So I thought, oh, okay, I'll do graphic design. So it just sort of happened that way. So I went and studied graphic design. And then my first job was with the marketing department of the college, actually the same place where I studied. And
cool.
I was just designing their marketing sort of material. Because when I went to college, it was all on drawing boards. And then you go into a real world and it was all on computers because they're so far behind, the colleges at the time. Mm-hmm. So my first job was doing that. Then I think my next job, I designed watches. I don't know if you remember the Swatch watches, those plastic.
Sure.
Well, they weren't actually Swatches, but there was a rival company and they did really well in places like Italy. So I was designing those sort of watches. Then I worked for a lot of different local design agencies. And I always found that after like a couple of years, I get bored because you get typecast with the type of work you do. So I'd move on and try and sort of move up the ladder a little bit. Eventually had a small share of a little design company. And then my partner there, who was doing the kind of selling side, he wanted to move abroad. So that is when I went freelance. And I think I've been freelancing. I actually had to look this up for the podcast. I've been freelancing now as a graphic designer for 13 years.
13 years.
Yeah.
Nice. You mentioned like kind of after a couple years you get bored doing, I guess, like the same thing or getting typecasted. Do you find that with freelance it's the same thing? Like you get bored after a certain amount of time, you have to like kind of drastically shift things up?
Well, totally. I mean, the whole time I've been working, probably the whole of my career really, I've always had side projects because I never found that it would kind of satisfy my sort of creativity doing the graphic design work. I think because you were so led by what the client wanted, and it may not be things you're remotely interested in. So, I'd always do a side project, and that would be, it could be anything, writing blogs or coming up with product ideas, doing cartoons, that sort of thing. And also I found that over the years I'd run out of ideas because you get typecast. So you're doing the same old project year after year. I'd have to think of ways I could get new ideas, which is when I started reading up books about creative thinking techniques, just to try and sort of snap myself out of my normal way of thinking.
And then that's what kind of led to you creating the Idea Medic blog and then the podcast?
Yeah, I mean, prior to that, I've had numerous blogs. I did blog about graphic design for quite a few years. And then I blogged about invention because I'm also fascinated by product ideas and invention. Yeah, and then went on to the Idea Medic because I started thinking as well with the Idea Medic that a lot of people, obviously us as creatives, we know how to come up with ideas, or we get ideas probably bombarded in our heads all the time. But other people, they just don't seem to know how to have ideas, and they're kind of amazed by it. When there are actually a lot of techniques that you can use, you don't have to sit there and wait for this kind of Eureka moment to happen. There are sort of different things that you can do to sort of get ideas as well.
Well, we're all waiting to hear some of them because I think that's something that myself and a lot of other people, that's one of the things that we struggle with a lot is that, writer's block or creative block when you really want the idea to come, but it's not coming. And I think for me, it's one of those things where you just kind of got to wait for it to come and hope that when it comes in big spurts, big long spurts, and to try to get all those ideas down. That's my method. So what are some of the ways that we can kind of not force it, but kind of help the ideas to kind of come to birth?
Well, one of the ideas I love, and I actually read about this, and it was like, you think, oh wow, you couldn't believe it. I read an Edward Bono book quite a few years ago, and it's the first time I was really introduced to this idea of introducing randomness to get ideas. I don't know if you've ever tried this. What you do is, for example, I've just tried it on my blog for getting ideas for blog posts. So you just get a random word, and there's random word generators online. It could be anything it gives you. Then you take that random word, so maybe the random word is dog or something like that. I would then mind map out the word dog, but then I've then got to try and relate it back to the subject I was originally writing about. So if I was, writing about ideas, I think, how could I relate dog back to getting ideas or something like that? And you'll probably find that by doing that, you'll have a list of potential ways that you could write about your subject just from sort of taking that one word. And you can apply that to anything. You can apply it to come up with product ideas, for cartoons, anything like that. So that's one way. Do you want me to tell you another?
Yeah, well, no, I like that idea, and I can't wait to get back to that because that particular blog post you're talking about was kind of profound for me too. So anyway, but yeah, keep going.
Okay. Another one I like to do, and it's probably something people do anyway, but this is just more of a systematic approach, and that is to look back at your day. So you look back at each day and you set yourself a series of questions. So you say, okay, what did I do today? And you can just make a list or mentally note it in your head. And then you start to think, okay, so what ideas could I get out of those things I've done? Or you say, who did I speak to today? What did they talk about? And you just write a list of all these conversations, and you'll probably spot problems they talked about or little sort of fun things that they mentioned. And you can get ideas from anything like that, things to write about. I've had ideas for cartoons that way. An example I give of an idea for an app, I never developed it, but it just sort of exercises your mind, was I went shopping in Leicester, which is a city sort of in the UK, and just noticed, because I wear a Fitbit all the time, noticed just while shopping, I'd walk 6 miles, which is incredible. So I thought, people hate sort of getting fit, really. So there's a way, maybe you could come up with an app where people got points or something, or shops gave them vouchers, depending on the mileage they walked during the shops. There could be routes set around shops, something like that. And yeah, it's just picking out little bits of your day, but do it in a very systematic way. So maybe you set an alarm each night or something like that. Just systematically write what you do. And I go through little periods where I set myself the task of, say, coming up with 3 ideas a day. And it might not be anything I'm actually going to use, but it's just to keep my mind sort of buzzing over. Some I'll pick out, some I'll use, some I won't.
Yeah. I think that's one of those things too, where it's, how like events are always better in hindsight.
Yeah.
Like, you might not even be having fun with what you're doing, but then like kind of looking back on it, just like looking back on college, you realize how fun it was and how much you miss it. Or, I just got back from vacation, and just like looking back on it, it seems so much better than it was like while I was there. You know what I mean? Like trying to enjoy the moment. But I like that idea of looking back on your day. And especially for me, when I was starting to write, I was like, wow, my days are very uninteresting. I have a very uninteresting life. But then when you start to like you said, think about the conversations you had with people, or the things that you mentioned, or the weird things that you didn't really notice in the moment, you realize how they are very interesting when you're able to kind of put a spin on it, looking back in hindsight. And I think that's a great idea generation tool for people as well.
Yeah, and I think you probably just let those things go by otherwise, don't you? You don't take notice of it. It's just gone. Right.
It's that trying to be that constant observer, but realizing that you can't until you're able to kind of harken back on those memories.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Any other ideas?
Well, mind mapping is one of my favourites, which I'm guessing everybody's done, but I probably do it in a lot looser. I mean, some people say what I do is not mind mapping, because I just let everything completely free flow. So I'll start with a central word. So if we take dog, for example, I'll start with that as a central word, and then branch off that all different things, so you've got you walking the dog, you've got, feeding the dog, and then they branch off into more. But what I'll do is I'll let actually those go random. So instead of sticking to, so if I've gone, say, dog, and then gone to walk, the next word that relates to walk is not anything necessarily to do with dog. It could be walk, it could be, tree, or, something you see on the walk, or it could be shoes or something like that. And again, I think that it kind of mixes in a bit of mind mapping, but puts back a bit of randomness in there. So, you start getting extra different connections. And I'll also, while mind mapping, I'll bring in some drawings, little doodles. They don't look like anything special, but they're just, I think it opens your mind up a little different way, because I'll also start, instead of just thinking about the words that I'm drawing, it'll be, okay, what looks like that doodle I've done? So if I've drawn something that's kind of circular, maybe that looks like a wheel, or maybe that looks like the centre of an eye. I'll do that to sort of get sort of additional randomness and additional ideas to come in there. And each time you get these branches, you just kind of start trying to relate it back to the central idea, and how can you remake a connection there?
Now, as people are trying to actively come up with ideas, or you said before, like it's not about that Eureka moment, but as they're, mind mapping or looking back on your day or trying to find a way to randomize things, are we looking for that Eureka moment then to pop up where they're like, yes, this is the thing I was kind of searching for? Or is it just kind of like keep on going and then look back on the ideas that you wrote down?
Well, you'll probably find, and I will generally find when I do it, that I will get a eureka moment. You know, I think, oh, that's cool. But ideally, you don't want to stick with that eureka moment because you want to keep going, because that eureka moment may not be your best eureka moment, if you know what I mean. If you narrow it down that quickly, you may miss a lot of ideas that if you'd have kept going with that mind map or kept going with a random word, I mean, you don't have to use one random word, you can keep going. Then you kind of want as many ideas as you can at the beginning, and then you want to start narrowing. So it's that process where come up with many ideas as you can, and then you gradually narrow them down to try and get the best one.
So then how do you know when to stop, like trying to brainstorm? Like, do you kind of set a timer for yourself and say, or like you do, like, I'm going to come up with 3 like major ideas, like 3 eureka moments before I kind of analyze what I've done and pick the best?
I'm not that structured, but I mean, what I do is if I was doing it for a client job, as a designer, and I know I've got, like, say, a day in total to do the job, then I need to think about the actual physical time it's going to take me to actually put the idea together. So I'll then say, okay, well, I think, you've got 2 hours to do that. So I'll just literally spend 2 hours trying to come up with ideas, and then it will get to the point of 2 hours and I think, well, I've got to stop there. So I've now got to, and I'll tend to go with a highlighter. I'll just have like a yellow highlighter, and I'll have this mass of words and stuff written on a page, and I'll just go around with this yellow highlighter and ring, yeah, that's decent, and then, I might process them a little bit more, and then I'll start working them up. But if I'm doing them for myself, it will be more a case of, when I feel happy that I've got a few good ideas, or I might even only wait until I've got one really good idea. I'll process it a bit more. But if it's something for me, I know what I want, if you know what I mean, or I don't have to satisfy anyone else. So I haven't got to come up with, 3 good ideas. I've just got to come up with one thing I'm happy with. So yeah, it works slightly differently, I think.
Very cool. Any others before we move on?
Well, the similar to the random word, you can also use images, just very, very similarly. But what you'll get from images is, if you go on to something like Pixabay, do you know the royalty-free site? I don't know if you know that.
What's it called?
Pixabay. It's a free images site. There's lots of images site. It'll be just a nice image will come up, and you can just do something similar, and you can just write down everything you see in that image and start mind mapping off of there, just to give you new connections to whatever you're working on. Free writing? Have you tried free writing?
I have. I'm not very good at it because most of the time it's so meta. All I'm writing about is the fact that I can't think of anything to write about because I'm so focused on the idea of writing. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've actually used that to come up with a style for a post-it cartoon, and I've been trying to come up with this idea. Originally, I was working with another woman. Well, it was just like a personal project. We were just doing like a combined thing. And we wanted ideas for like a business character. And I'd sort of been drawing things, and they just looked really boring. They were just the same thing you saw everywhere. So I thought, how can I get ideas? So I started free writing. And all you do is set a timer, like for 5 or 10 minutes, and just start writing about the topic. And like you say, if you can't think of anything, you just write in, I don't know what to write. I can't think.
The trick is to not stop, right?
Yeah, totally. Because I think it's supposed to stop your subconscious or your conscious brain censoring your subconscious, something like that.
Yeah, I can't censor mine.
So from that, it was weird. I was just writing, how can I get ideas? What could I try? And the idea of using post-it notes came out of that. So then I developed that into little post-it note characters. And since then, I've used them for other things as well. That same style.
Yeah, and you also mentioned, working with somebody else. I'm thinking back to college and one of my first creative writing courses. This will actually combine a bunch of the different things that you've talked about, but the professor handed out these like cards, and they were in quotes, so it would be like a title for a piece, and then you would get the title and then write down the first line of that piece, and then you would hand it to your right, and then that person would have the title of the piece, and they'd have the first line, and then they'd have to go with it. And this actually led to the first piece I got published in like a literary magazine, but the title was Sign on the Dotted Line.
Oh yeah.
And the kid wrote "Pa, come quick, the Comanche done gone lit the barn on fire."
Oh no.
So he was trying to screw me over, and then I was like trying to completely change that up. So I ended up writing the grandfather was going crazy again, and talking about how this grandfather in the story was going senile, and every movie that he watched, he would go out into public and like reenact them. So he had just seen a John Wayne film, and so anyway, the idea there is like to try to find somebody to help you to either randomize it or to try to screw you up. I know David Zinn when he was on the podcast was talking about like doodle battling, where you would draw a crazy doodle and then hand it off to your friend, and then they would have to continue the doodle to try to make it into like kind of a coherent picture, and then passing it back and forth, trying to screw your friend over. You know what I mean?
Totally,
so if you could try to find like a way to like combine that to like you're forced to not do what you would normally do, and to see what kind of doors that opens up.
Yeah, I mean, myself and Sandra Busby, who you had on the podcast, we've been doing some experiments recently.
Yeah, I know. I know about one of them.
Yeah, with alcohol, basically, in a sensible way. So yeah, just
responsibly.
Yes, with 4 units of alcohol, we've been trying different experiments. Like where, say, we sketch something sober, and then we sketch it after 4 units. And we've been doing a similar thing the other day but we weren't trying to screw each other over too much. We were doing adverts. So we had to come up with an advert each, both sober and both after 4 units, where she'd give me a product. So I think she gave me dog food. And I'm trying to think I was swimming, and then we had to pick a place for each other where it had to be situated. So it was like dog food and swimming pool, and then she gave me lipstick and outer space for the other one. So you wouldn't see it until just before you started. And like you said, then you think, oh my God, 20 minutes to come up with an advert idea.
I like that. So if you can find a trusted partner, maybe head to our Facebook group, yourcreativepush.com/group, if you want to like kind of find either an accountability partner or somebody that will shake things up with you every Friday if you don't have to drink with each other if you don't want. But I think that's a great idea to have somebody else to kind of bounce things off of and to kind of prompt you to do things that you wouldn't normally. I have it written down here, early results of the alcohol experiment. So what is your take that alcohol does inspire creativity?
We found out a lot of things. I can't give too much away because I haven't heard Sandra's results yet. But I think one of the things we found is that alcohol makes quite a bit of difference when there's time constraints. Well, that's what I found anyway, is that when you say we were giving ourselves half an hour to do a sketch or half an hour to do something else, when you're sober, I was keeping time on that, that stopwatch.
Right.
I kept on
aware of the time.
So aware of the time, kept on looking at it. And yet when I was doing the sketch where I'd been drinking, I got so engrossed in the sketch. And I said, oh, I better check the time. And, you'd have a look and you might have 10 minutes left. But I was obviously so focused and so into it. And the sketch is actually, neither of my sketches are very good because I'm so out of practice with sketching. But the sketch after alcohol is a lot better.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Which I didn't think it would be because I thought it would affect kind of dexterity of your hands, hand-eye coordination. But clearly not with me.
Yeah, 4 units. That might be I don't know if that's the magic number, if that's like the cutoff point. I'm sure there's like some kind of arc or a graph that shows where it starts to fall off. I know for writing for me, a beer would help me spark the creativity, but then like 2 beers would kind of make me sluggish, and then 3 beers and beyond was just crap, but it's a good experiment, and I appreciate you doing that in the name of science.
Totally. I was thinking about doing a chocolate one next.
Chocolate, nice. Chocolate makes everything better.
I think so, yeah.
So I wanted to get back to, you mentioned the thing about the dog, and you had this recent blog post that kind of blew my mind a little bit. The idea of treating your creativity kind of like walking the dog and taking the decision out of it. So I was wondering if you could talk about that post in particular.
Yeah, I mean, before I had a dog, I used to think, oh, you need to get fit. You're not doing much fitness-wise. So I decided to go on a walk. In a day, I'd like go for a quick wander around the village, maybe 20 minutes or something. And then, so great, I've done it. Next day, get up, and then in the day do exactly the same thing. Next day it'd be raining, and you think, do you know what? I don't really want to go get wet. So I think, just leave it. I'll do it tomorrow. Next day it'd come, either it'd be raining again, or you just get, engrossed in what you're doing. You wouldn't do it. So, your good intentions would last 2 days. So I get a dog, and that decision is completely gone. I am walking. I'm walking once or twice a day, depending if my partner can do the other one. And I've no longer got to make a decision because the dog has to be walked. And the dog would remind me quite heavily if I didn't walk him. So I was just thinking it would be great if our creativity was like that. So we no longer had to think about it. It wasn't a decision we had to make. Because I know if I walk my dog, and sometimes it's chucking it down with rain, I really don't want to go, I'm tired. But I'll go out and, something will happen, something will be funny, the dog will do something funny, I'll meet a friend, we'll have a chat. Or finally the sun will come out and you actually enjoy it. You don't want to do it, but you really enjoy it. And I thought, if creativity could be like that, or if we could find a way to build that muscle so it was no longer a decision we were making. And I think you can only do that really by doing sort of a challenge where you do something for a certain amount of time. And I don't really think 30 days is enough. I found that 100-day projects really helped me. So if you set yourself that you can do something for 100 days or longer, I think that starts to build that thing in, then that it's no longer a decision you're making, it's something you do. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's building habits is really tough sometimes. And I do agree with you. The 30-day thing is like, you can get an idea for like what's possible if you do something 30 days in a row. But yeah, I think it does take like 100 days or even a year of doing something over and over again to make it just like a part of your life. It's one of the hardest things to do. But I think if people can develop that habit with their creativity, and even if it is just a few minutes a day, I think that's like a profound change that you can make in your life. And I think a lot of it comes down to kind of like we were talking about before, having an accountability partner or some type of accountability. Just imagining like your audience, like building an audience or having a friend, or just imagining some form of a sad puppy dog looking at you with like a leash in its mouth, like being like, all right, let's take this creativity for a walk today. Like it has to happen. Like you have to do it, and making it have that kind of urgency.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the accountability thing you said. I know I'm in an online business group, a Facebook group. It's like a private one run by Judith Morgan. And each week we have to, we don't have to, it's optional, but we can do check-ins. So basically we put what we plan to do that week, what we're going to achieve. And then the next week you go back in, you put what you're going to do that week, but you also go back in and put like done, not done, done. And that actually stating it, these are personal projects as well. Stating that on there does hold you a lot more accountable, because even though, the other people don't really mind if you've done it or not, but you kind of feel guilty almost to yourself and to the group that you haven't done what you've said you're going to do. Right.
Yeah. And I know you're a big proponent of writing things down. And I think that adds like the second factor to it, like just writing down your goals for the week, what you want to have done by this time next week, by this time next month, whatever it is, by the end of the day. Writing it down for yourself, I think makes it a real tangible thing that you are kind of trying to hold yourself accountable for. But then if you can find somebody to kind of tell this thing to, then it adds that second element where, like you said, they might not care, or they'll go easy on you, but still knowing that, it's not just your eyes, it's not just your brain that's like holding you accountable for it, but it's, somebody else.
I think it's the same even, I don't know if you find this, if I blog and say I deliberately set myself challenges and I'll blog about it, and that's really not necessarily for anybody else, the blog. That's so I've stated it and put it up there. This is what I'm doing. It's like almost like I'm doing this, and it's almost to tell myself, yes, you are doing this.
Right.
So then I feel like I've got to keep updating where I am with it. Even though again, nobody else is probably, that bothered if I've done it or not. But it makes me feel like I have to. It's that accountability thing again.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, I'm the same way. And sometimes I even push it. Like if I know I'm feeling particularly lazy, and I know that this thing has to get done by a certain time, I'll I'll find a way to put it on Facebook or put it in the group or say it on the podcast and in an outro, like this will be done by a certain time, and then then it has to get done.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It's really weird. Just by stating it that way, it's sort of more likely to happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you experience any resistances either with, your blog, your podcast, or your graphic design, your art, anything that you do, your self-imposed challenges, anything that you kind of experience on a daily basis that kind of holds you back?
Well, I'm trying to transition at the moment from graphic design into doing more other things. So I'm constantly experimenting with more of the ideas, and I want to get into idea generation. I'm not quite sure how I can make a business of that at the moment, whether it's me creating things or whether I'm quite interested in teaching people. But one thing I've been trying to overcome is trying to stop worrying about looking an idiot online. And that is a resistance. Again, like doing the drinking experiments. I've been videoing myself, and I haven't actually put them up anywhere yet because I've videoed myself talking about it after I've had a few drinks. Yeah. And so you think, do I put that up or not? Right. And then it's that resistance to that when really that's probably how you got to show yourself, kind of the warts and all type thing, I think. Nowadays, right. Not stupidly, I don't mean, but right. You got to seem real. So I have resistance to doing that, and I've created little cartoons and stuff for it. And some of them I think, I don't know if I dare show. It's too silly. It's probably more a resistance to putting things out there than physically starting it, if that makes sense. I do have another sort of resistance, which is I've tried a lot of things over the years. And I've gotten to a certain point. So for example, I've tried to license characters, little cartoon characters, and I've got a lot of interest. And I've had someone who I thought was going to do something with it, and it's gone on for about a year. And it's looked like he might be able to develop it for TV or something at one point, and then it'll fall through. And then I have big resistance then to starting projects in that arena for fear of disappointment. So I'll switch to something different. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I've found this good thing recently. I don't know. Have you seen this woman called Mel? Is it Mel Robbins? I think her name is. Have you seen anything she's done about a 5-second rule?
Not yet. No. What's that?
Well, I have the silly resistance. I don't know if you get this. Like, I've had this project in my head, and it'll be a really tiny little project that will take me like 2 or 3 hours to complete. Like, I had an idea of making characters out of just ripping up magazines, and I was using kind of techie kind of magazines with like cameras and that sort of thing. And I think, that kind of looks like a character's head. So I'd tear it out and I'd put it next to things that could be arms. And I was thinking, I wonder if that would make a character. But so far, I'd just be doing that in my head, thinking how it could be torn out. And I'd be sitting there, and, in the time I've been sitting there, I could have actually done it. And then I saw this woman talking about this 5-second rule. And basically she says, as soon as you get this idea to do something, count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Before you can stop yourself, go and do the first step to doing that thing. So for me, that would be going and grabbing the magazines, starting tearing them out. It's just that thing, if you don't do the first step, it just stays in your head, probably like your words with music that you talked about. Right. Yeah, it's like stop that resistance before it catches hold almost.
Right. 5 seconds as opposed to 5 years.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's something we talk about a lot, is that the longer that you wait, like the harder it is to start doing that, because that's when like your brain has a chance to come up with all the different reasons why you shouldn't do it, or all the reasons why you'll look silly if you try to do that thing. I like that 5-second rule. There's like no time at all to think.
Yeah, exactly. And she says it about other things, like, if you've got to do a speech or you're thinking about going over and talk to someone, like when you're heroes or whatever, anything like that, just start something before you have time to stop yourself.
Wow, that's good advice. We'll find that resource and then we'll link that up at the show notes page.
Yeah, I think there's a TED Talk. I think that's the best one. I know she's got a book. I haven't read the book, but I think there's a TED Talk that she's done that's probably the best one.
Very cool. So do you think that you'll ever get back to some of those things that, look like they were going to go somewhere, but then didn't. Is that like one of those things where it's like a fresh wound and it needs to like heal a little bit before you can get back to it? Or is it one of those things where you kind of close the door to something and move on to something different? Do you still have like a kind of a passion in your heart to go back to those things?
Well, some of the characters, I think they've run their course, really. I don't think there's anywhere else I can go, because it explored a couple of routes, and then this guy that seemed really interested, after that I kind of shut the door on that one. I have done more character design since, I do a lot of different ones, but I tend to switch. Because you go on this roller coaster ride, at one point you think, oh, this is going to make it, I'm going to have something that's going to be on TV, or it's going to be in a book. And then, it'd fall down the roller coaster. So then I'd switch and I'd say, come up with product ideas or start a blog, which is probably a totally wrong thing to do. I should probably focus. I'm sure everybody has this problem. Focus on the one thing and keep going. But it is like that open wound, like you said. So I'd switch and I'd come up with product ideas, or I'd switch and I'd start blogging, just because I couldn't face going through that again.
Yeah, I think my wife sent me this thing before, like it's like essentially a roller coaster graph of like the life of an entrepreneur. And it's the same, I think, for the life of a creative person, like dealing with, like just all the emotional highs and lows of this thing that you are kind of birthing into the world, whether it's a business, whether it's a blog, whether it's your art, all of these things, like where you love it one day, you hate it the next day, like it's the best idea ever, even if it is only in your head and not like how it's taking off and how other people are receiving it. It's a struggle to deal with those highs and lows, and to find value in it, where like yesterday was the best idea and today it's just like, why did I even think of this?
Yeah.
But I think if you know that you're on a roller coaster, I think that makes it easier, or at least easier to continue going along the ride, knowing that there are going to be ups and downs, and that the downs alone don't last forever. Just you got to go up, even if it does require you to get on a like kind of a different track, like a different roller coaster, like mid ride. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I definitely do that. I definitely switch roller coasters.
Yeah, I love it. Before we get to the final push, I was wondering, did you have any resources or anything else that you find inspiration from that maybe we all could as well?
Yeah, I think if anyone's interested in learning more about sort of creative thinking techniques, I love any book by Michael Michalko. He has these books and he talks about creative thinking technique, but then he goes into a little bit of, the reasoning behind it, and he'll give you some examples. So I really like those. And I think he's got about three books. And they're all good. I think I've got them all. And he's also got some little cards. I don't know if you've heard of a creative technique called Scamper.
Scamper?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, it's basically a series of words. So like S stands for substitute. So you'll take something, like let's say it was a product, and you've got a product on your desk, and you say, okay, what could I substitute on a mug? So I might substitute something for the handle. And it's just to get your brain thinking in different ways, come up with new ideas. So he's got some cards that basically use that technique, but each of them have extras kind of words and prompts on them. So they're quite interesting. Edward de Bono, I've got his book, How to Have Creative Ideas. Really like that book. I do find that he tends to repeat the techniques in there, but I really like that book because I say it got me first thinking about the random words and how randomness could, really help with creativity. Character design, I love character design. If anybody likes that, I love the Pictoplasma books, and they're just full of, some of them are quite odd characters, but really kind of interesting things. And John Bergerman, who does kind of doodly characters, I love his stuff as well. Very
cool. And we will link all of that up at the show notes page at yourcreativepush.com/Tara Roskell. Tara, it's time for the final push. And this is where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today, and just give them your best final words of advice and really push them to pursue their own creative passions.
So my advice would be set yourself personal creative challenges. And that could be, like I've done 100-day projects, which are is a big online thing, sort of group thing. Or it could be setting your own, challenge. So you decide, I am going to do X. and I'm going to do that for 30 days or 60 days. I'm going to, write 500 words every day, or I'm going to draw a little cartoon, whatever it is. So set yourself those creative challenges, and I like to do them fairly continually, and that's what I'd suggest. And also, don't be afraid to experiment, because I'm having so much fun at the moment, just experimenting, not just with the alcohol, but experimenting, learning new things. So, learn a new bit of software and you'll be amazed what sort of possibilities that opens up for you. Learn anything new and sort of new avenues open up there.
Yeah, you never know kind of where learning a new thing, a new skill, a new computer program, a new art form will kind of take you on your creative journey. Tara, thank you so much for coming on the show today and for giving us that push.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been good fun.
Absolutely. And you can find more about Tara and Ideamedic at our website, ideamedic.com, or you can find that on iTunes for the podcast, but the blog is wonderful as well. Or you can find Tara on Instagram as Tara Roskell, Roskell. Or on Facebook, she is Ideamedic, and we'll have everything we talked about today, including where you can find her and the podcast and the blog at yourcreativepush.com/Tara Roskell. Tara, thanks again.
Thanks very much.
Oh, such good stuff in this episode, and my thanks again to Tara for coming on the show. So many good ideas there about generating ideas. Whether you're using randomness or you're journaling, writing down what you did in your day and reflecting back on it, if you're mind mapping or free writing or finding an accountability partner and doing creative things with them in order to shake things up, whatever tips you take from this episode, all of them have to do with coming up with ideas and doing that every single day. So much of these things have to do with changing the way your brain thinks about things so that you can shake things up. And not only that, but if you, like Tara said, can get into a habit of creating new ideas every day, make a goal for yourself to have a certain amount of ideas that you come up with every day, your mind will be more focused on the fact that you are actively trying and attempting to get new ideas every single day. And that means that you have to be on call for those ideas when they come naturally as well. It's not about becoming a creative person for 30 minutes a day or an hour a day. It's about using that time to become a creative person as a habit for the rest of your life. So when you might not be feeling as motivated or you might not be as confident in the ideas as they come, you need to take that Mel Robbins strategy of the 5-second rule and don't let those resistances creep in. Don't let the fact that you're laying down on the couch or watching a TV show or zoning out stop you from getting those ideas out, from at least writing those ideas down, taking that first step to making that idea into a real thing. So often we talk about how that first step is always the hardest and things get much easier once you get started. And that's something that never goes away. I found myself yesterday sitting on the couch for like an hour thinking about the work that I had to do, but I just kept finding other things to do instead, whether it was scrolling through Instagram or going on Facebook or watching YouTube videos of the newest gadgets that are under $15. I mean, just pathetic stuff instead of doing the work. So do that first step. Rip the Band-Aid off as soon as you get that inspiration to do something or that idea that you should be doing something. Just get up and do it and don't think about the other things that you maybe could do in place of that. It's so hard, but it's so important to do. So my thanks again to Tara for coming on the show, for being a part of the Facebook group as well. If you want to join the Facebook group, go to yourcreativepush.com/group. But also definitely check out today's show notes page. A ton of resources that Tara gave us today. yourcreativepush.com/247. And definitely check out the Ideamedic podcast and the Ideamedic blog. All will be linked up there. On Thursday's show, we have Tracy Fletcher King. Tracy is an artist, illustrator, printmaker, and teacher from Brisbane, Australia. She has an amazing story. She is one of the bravest people that I've spoken with, and such an awesome outlook on not just creativity, but life. You can find her at tracyfletcherking.com. That's TRACEY FletcherKing.com. Or on Instagram, she is Tracy Fletcher King. Or again, yourcreativepush.com/247. Today's show notes page if you want to get her links as well. But that is all I've got for you today, so hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done, start generating those ideas. I love you all, and we will see you next time. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.